There's a confusing kind of love that doesn't feel like love at all. It pulls you in, makes you feel special, chosen, and then slowly starts to hurt you. You begin to question yourself. If they care about me, why do they treat me like this? The truth is, not everyone expresses love in a healthy way. Some people fear it. And when love gets too close, too real, too deep, they don't lean in, they pull away. What feels like rejection is often protection. What feels like distance is often fear. And if you don't understand this pattern, you can end up chasing someone who only runs faster the more you care. There's something deeply misunderstood about people who pull away just when things start to feel real. From the outside, it can look cold, confusing, even cruel. You feel the connection building. You feel the closeness growing. And just when it starts to mean something, they begin to retreat. And your instinct is to question it. Why now? Why when things were finally getting good? But what's really happening beneath the surface has very little to do with you and everything to do with what closeness represents to them. For some people, connection doesn't just feel like warmth and excitement, it also feels like risk. The deeper they get emotionally involved, the more exposed they feel. It's like standing closer to the edge of something they don't fully trust. Because to them, love isn't just about gaining something beautiful, it's also about the possibility of losing it. And that possibility is what triggers fear. So as the bond grows stronger, so does their internal conflict. One part of them wants the connection. They enjoy your presence, your energy, the way you make them feel, but another part of them starts to panic. It starts asking questions like, what if I lose myself in this? What if I get hurt? What if I can't handle the expectations that come with this level of closeness? And instead of sitting with those emotions and communicating them, they respond in the only way they know how. They create distance. That distance becomes their sense of control. Because when they step back, they feel safer. When they reduce the intensity, they feel like they can breathe again. It's not that the connection isn't meaningful, it's that it's too meaningful, and they don't have the tools to manage what that brings up inside them. This is why their behavior can feel so contradictory. One moment, they're fully present, engaged, even affectionate. The next, they seem distant, unavailable, or emotionally shut down. It's not a calculated game, it's an internal push and pull between desire and fear. And if you're on the receiving end of that, it can be incredibly destabilizing. Because you're trying to make sense of something that doesn't follow a consistent pattern. You're trying to respond with logic to something that is driven by emotion they don't fully understand themselves. But the key shift happens when you stop personalizing that reaction. Because their withdrawal isn't proof that you're too much or not enough. It's a reflection of how they experience closeness. The deeper the connection becomes, the more it activates parts of them that feel unsafe, uncertain, or overwhelmed. And once you see that, you begin to understand that their distance isn't about rejecting you. It's about protecting themselves from something they don't yet know how to hold. For someone who values independence above everything else, love can feel less like a gift and more like a threat to their sense of control. Not because they don't want connection, but because of what they believe connection will take away from them. To them, closeness isn't just about sharing moments, it's about potential obligation, expectation, and the quiet fear of losing themselves in someone else's world. So when they start to feel emotionally invested, something inside them begins to resist. It's subtle at first. They may still show up, still engage, still enjoy your company. But internally there's a shift, a voice that starts whispering, this is getting too serious, this is starting to matter too much. And when something starts to matter that much, it starts to feel like something they could lose. That's where control becomes everything. Because control to them equals safety. If they can manage the pace, limit the emotional depth, or create space when things feel intense, they believe they can avoid getting hurt. It's not always conscious. Most of the time, it's an automatic response shaped by past experiences. Moments where closeness may have led to disappointment, pressure, or emotional overwhelm. So instead of leaning deeper into love, they try to manage it. They might avoid defining the relationship. They might keep conversations surface level when things start getting too personal. They might disappear for a while just to reset themselves. And from your perspective, it can feel like they're pulling away for no reason at all. But for them, there is a reason. It's just not one they easily express. Because expressing it would require vulnerability. And vulnerability feels like the very thing they're trying to protect themselves from. This is why their actions can feel so confusing. They can care about you, enjoy being with you, even think about you constantly, and still create distance. Because it's not the absence of feeling that drives their behavior. It's the fear of what those feelings could lead to. The deeper they fall, the less in control they feel. And instead of surrendering to that experience, they instinctively try to regain balance by pulling back. But here's the difficult part for you. When you respond by trying to get closer, by asking for reassurance, clarity, or more consistency, it can feel to them like pressure. Even if your intentions are completely valid, even if you're simply asking for what any healthy connection requires, they may interpret it as something that threatens their autonomy. So they retreat further. And now you're caught in a dynamic where the more you seek connection, the more they seek distance. Understanding this doesn't mean you accept behavior that hurts you. It simply gives you clarity. It helps you see that their resistance isn't about your worth. It's about their relationship with control, vulnerability, and emotional safety. Because until someone learns that love doesn't require them to lose themselves, they will always keep one foot out the door, no matter how much they feel. It's one of the hardest things to accept, that someone can treat you poorly, not because you don't matter, but because you matter more than they're prepared to handle. From your perspective, it feels backwards. You think, if I truly meant something to them, wouldn't they step up? Wouldn't they be clearer, kinder, more consistent? But for someone who struggles with emotional closeness, significance doesn't always lead to better behavior. Sometimes it does the opposite. Because when you start to matter deeply, you stop being just a casual presence in their life. You become someone who has influence, someone whose opinion matters, someone whose absence would actually hurt. And that level of importance can feel overwhelming to someone who isn't comfortable with emotional dependency. So instead of leaning into that connection, they instinctively try to reduce its intensity. They might take longer to respond. They might seem less available. They might act indifferent at times when you expect warmth. And it leaves you confused, trying to reconcile how someone who once showed so much interest can suddenly feel so distant. But the shift isn't happening because you've lost value in their eyes. It's happening because your value has increased to a level that triggers fear. Because now there's something at stake. And when there's something at stake, there's the possibility of loss. There's the possibility of disappointment. There's the possibility of being seen fully and completely and not knowing how to handle that level of exposure. So they create space, not in a way that feels logical or fair to you, but in a way that helps them regain emotional balance. It's like turning down the volume on something that feels too loud, even if it's something they actually enjoy. And this is where it becomes painful on your side, because you start to internalize their behavior. You start thinking, maybe I'm too much. Maybe I said the wrong thing. Maybe I care more than they do. You begin adjusting yourself, holding back, overthinking, trying to be easier to love. But the truth is, their reaction isn't a reflection of you being too much. It's a reflection of them not knowing how to handle something that feels meaningful. When someone isn't used to emotional depth, real connection can feel destabilizing. It challenges their привычные patterns. It asks them to show up in ways they haven't practiced. And instead of rising to meet that challenge, they retreat to what feels familiar. Distance, independence, emotional control. And in doing so, they can unintentionally hurt the very person they feel closest to. Because pushing you away creates a sense of relief for them, but confusion and pain for you. Understanding this doesn't make their behavior okay. It doesn't mean you should tolerate inconsistency or emotional unavailability, but it does shift how you interpret it. You stop seeing their distance as a verdict on your worth, and you start seeing it for what it really is, a limit in their ability to handle closeness. Because someone who truly has the capacity for a healthy relationship doesn't withdraw when things get real. They rise to meet it. Mixed signals can feel like emotional whiplash. One moment, they're warm, engaged, even affectionate. The next, they seem distant, distracted, or completely unavailable. And you're left trying to piece it together, searching for consistency in something that keeps shifting. You start asking yourself, which version of them is real? The one who shows up or the one who pulls away? The truth is both are real. Because what you're experiencing isn't a game. It's a reflection of their internal conflict. It's what happens when someone wants connection but doesn't know how to sustain it without feeling overwhelmed. When things are light, when there's space, when the emotional stakes feel low, they can show up fully. They can be present, charming, attentive. In those moments, connection feels safe because it hasn't gone too deep yet. There's still a sense of control. They can enjoy you without feeling consumed by the relationship. But as soon as that connection starts to deepen, When conversations become more meaningful, when expectations begin to form, when emotions start to carry weight, that's when the shift happens. Because now it's no longer just about enjoying each other's company. Now it feels real. And real feels intense. That intensity is what triggers their overwhelm. It's like their emotional system doesn't know how to regulate the closeness. So instead of leaning in and processing it, they instinctively create distance to calm themselves down. That's where the inconsistency comes from. It's not that they wake up one day and decide to treat you differently. It's that their capacity changes depending on how emotionally activated they feel in the moment. When they feel safe, they move closer. When they feel overwhelmed, they pull back. And because that shift happens internally, without clear communication, all you see is the external result: hot and cold behavior that leaves you confused. You start trying to decode it. You analyze their texts, their tone, the timing of their responses. You look for patterns, for answers, for something that explains why they can be so present one day and so distant the next. But the pattern isn't in what they say, it's in what they feel. Their mixed signals are their way of regulating emotional intensity without having to confront it directly. Closeness raises their anxiety, so distance becomes their relief. And when that anxiety settles, when they feel grounded again, they come back toward you until the cycle repeats. The challenge is, if you don't understand this dynamic, you can easily get pulled into it. You start matching their inconsistency with over-effort. When they pull away, you chase. When they come back, you relax. Your emotional state begins to depend on their behavior. And that's where it becomes draining. Because you're no longer experiencing a stable connection, you're riding waves of unpredictability, hoping that the version of them you felt at the beginning becomes permanent. But consistency doesn't come from moments. It comes from emotional stability. And someone who hasn't learned how to handle emotional intensity will continue to send mixed signals, not because they want to confuse you, but because they don't yet know how to stay steady when things start to matter. There's a natural instinct that kicks in when you feel someone pulling away, an urge to close the gap. You want to understand what changed, fix whatever went wrong, and bring things back to how they were. So you reach out more, you try harder, you become more available, more patient, more accommodating. It comes from a genuine place. You care, and you don't want to lose the connection. But in this kind of dynamic, that instinct can quietly work against you. Because when someone has a pattern of avoiding emotional closeness, your pursuit doesn't feel like reassurance to them. It feels like pressure. Even if you're being kind, even if you're communicating in a healthy way, their internal response isn't based on your intention. It's based on how they interpret closeness itself. And to them, more closeness often feels overwhelming. So the more you lean in, the more they feel the need to create space. Not necessarily because they've stopped caring, but because the intensity is rising again, and they don't know how to manage it without stepping back. This is where the cycle becomes self-reinforcing. They pull away, you chase. You chase, they pull away further. And without realizing it, both of you are playing roles that keep the dynamic stuck exactly where it is. From your side, it can feel like effort should lead to results. You think, if I just show them I'm consistent, if I just prove I'm not going anywhere, they'll feel safe enough to open up. And while that might be true in a healthy dynamic, in this case, it often has the opposite effect. Because you're trying to solve their discomfort by increasing the very thing that causes it. And the more you give, the more unbalanced it becomes. You start overextending, emotionally, mentally, even physically. You make excuses for their behavior. You lower your expectations just to keep the connection alive. You begin to tolerate inconsistency because you're focused on the potential of what it could be, rather than the reality of what it is. And slowly, without even noticing, you lose your footing. Because your focus shifts from, is this right for me? How do I make this work? That's the turning point. Because chasing someone who is retreating doesn't bring them closer. It teaches them that they don't have to step up. It shows them that even when they create distance, the connection will still be there, waiting for them on their terms. And that removes the need for them to change. It also creates a dynamic where your value becomes tied to how much you're willing to give, rather than how you deserve to be treated. But real connection doesn't grow through pursuit alone. It requires mutual effort. It requires two people moving toward each other, not one constantly closing the distance while the other keeps stepping back. And the moment you recognize that, something shifts. You stop chasing. Not as a tactic, not as a way to get them to come back, but as a decision to protect your own emotional well-being. Because the truth is, the right person doesn't need to be pursued into consistency. They meet you there. There's a moment in this kind of experience where everything starts to shift. And it's not when they change, it's when you begin to see clearly. Up until that point, so much of your energy has been focused outward. You're trying to understand them, read between the lines, interpret their behavior, and adjust yourself in ways that might finally make things feel stable. But real power doesn't come from figuring them out perfectly. It comes from no longer needing to. Because the more you try to decode someone who is inconsistent, the more you stay emotionally tied to their unpredictability. Your mood begins to rise and fall based on how they show up. A message from them can lift your entire day, and their silence can make you question everything. Without realizing it, you hand over control of your emotional state to someone who hasn't even learned how to manage their own. And that's where understanding becomes something deeper than analysis. It becomes awareness. You begin to see the pattern for what it is, not what you hoped it would become. You recognize that their inconsistency isn't a puzzle you're meant to solve. It's a reality you're meant to respond to. And that response doesn't require you to chase, convince, or overextend. It requires you to choose how much access someone has to you, to choose what kind of behavior you accept, to choose whether this dynamic aligns with the kind of connection you truly want. Because once you understand that their actions come from their own limitations, their fear of closeness, their need for control, their discomfort with vulnerability, you stop taking it personally. You stop seeing it as something you need to fix or earn your way out of, and that changes everything. Not because they suddenly become consistent, but because you stop bending yourself to fit into their inconsistency. You start to pull your energy back, not in a defensive or reactive way, but in a grounded, self-respecting way. You stop over-explaining. You stop over-giving. You stop trying to fill the gaps they leave behind. And in that space, something important happens. You reconnect with yourself. You remember what it feels like to not be in a constant state of questioning. You remember what it feels like to be steady, to feel clear, to trust your own experience instead of second-guessing it. That's where your power is. Not in changing them, not in waiting for them, not in hoping they'll one day meet you where you are, but in recognizing that you deserve a connection that doesn't require you to lose yourself in the process. Because understanding isn't about staying and tolerating. It's about seeing the truth clearly enough to make a different choice. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't holding on tighter. It's letting go with clarity.